Sunday. The weather forecasting machine says rain, and so does the other weather forecasting machine. Logging temperature. Logging barometric pressure. 50 millimetres yesterday. In the middle of a little bit of a bright spot. The house dam is maybe 30% full. I can't see any tracks around its edge, so nobody's been drinking. Rabbit been scratching. The dry bladey grass has been submerged in fresh green new shoots. The tea tree that wasn't quite dead has all grown new leaves. And the pile of kindling wood has remained a pile. It hasn't fallen down. What to do with that is a bit of an interesting thought. Might have to fill in some paperwork, I think. Go looking for a thing called a fire permit. Perhaps, now that the landscape's a bit wetter. Green on green on green. Lots of lichen has survived the drought. And that's good to see. Dead wattle. With its lichens, an old man's beard. Going to try and keep the horizon out of the screen. Thought there might have been water in that depression, but no. Following an old four-wheel drive track there. Good indications of runoff here, and of course there is water in the top dam. And again, no tracks. No kangaroos, no possums, no goats, no deer, no pigs. Plenty of noise from the magpie. And we go down to the bottom dam. Puffballs, not edible mushrooms. This should be a V-shaped gully with a clear, rippling, crystal clean rivulet in the bottom of it, but from about 1850 on, it was farmed, and so the topsoil has fallen off the high ground and eroded away, and some of it has stuck in rank and swampy bogs where the rivulet used to be. And if you don't go and look it up in the old newspapers or have somebody who's aware of it explain it to you, you're born in the 20th century and you have no idea that any of that happened. Living in a remnant of a landscape lost. Topsoil, topsoil, wherefore art thou topsoil? Mostly wind blown away or washed out to sea. What remains is going salty or compacted underfoot. Maybe bugger all true topsoil hereabouts today. Melaleuca that's died in the drought. Indication of how dry it is when underbrush on the gully floor dies of thirst. The trees have kept their leaves because their roots go down a lot deeper. Here's one managed to stay alive, right smack in the centre of the gully. Somebody's long leaf spike rush garden. Parallel sides, smooth, tough, durable. If you know what you're doing, you can apparently weave a waterproof basket out of that stuff. I don't know what I'm doing, but at least I know that it's there. Kind of an alpine beard heath. Once in 30 years I've seen these things all produce a big crop of berries and I had a feed of them. It was really nice. Most of the time they just sort of hang on and try and stay alive during the dry weather. They live pretty close to the mukran, which is a different food plant entirely. And now, the big unveil reveal. Does Warble still have a pump, or did it go scuba diving? We still have a pump. There has been runoff, but it'll take a lot more to drown the pump. And that was what I came here to discover. And if I put the pump up any higher, I won't be able to use it. But on the other hand, I don't think I really likely to want to use it in the foreseeable future, say a month. It would take probably a month for the country to dry out to the point where I need to pump water out of the dam for firefighting purposes. And because they're talking about another 24 to 48 hours worth of rain, and I've had 50, and the 50 has wet the ground down and got it in a condition where just about anything that falls will now run off, I think I might move the pump up above the level of the spillway. So no matter how much rain I get, I don't get to drown the pump. Because if I leave it where it is, it's going to get wet before the spillway starts to trickle. And it's not forecast here, but there are places that are forecast to get 200 or 300 millimetres in the next 24 hours. Forewarned is forearmed, and I don't want to go scuba diving for a pump. Okay. Well, I would say that'll be sucking sand at the moment because it has got part of its outlet on the bottom. But if we get another 50 or 100 mils, I'm not going to be having a drowned pump to play with. Better safe than sorry, eh? The joys of being rich and decadent enough to have a pump on your dam, I guess. What an admirable view from Contemplation Rock. I should be walking up the hill and jumping in the car and going to town and mowing my son's lawn. But I really am enjoying looking at the dam with more water in it than I've seen for the best part of a year. I don't think it had, well, yeah, it might have had this much water in it when I first decided to buy the pump and the poly pipe and put the Aquarius pipeline in. So hopefully it never gets as low again as it was, say, a month ago. And all told, I think I put 20,000 litres into the dam and I took 15,000 litres out before I started replacing it. Quite an interesting learning experience. And watch the moss grow. Because remarkably, as dead as it looked a couple of weeks back, it's bounced back along with the lichen. As Frank Herbert said in his Dune trilogy, the prime function of biology is that the more life occupies a space, the more life can occupy the aforesaid space. Because every species creates niches for several more species. Thus, desert islands become rainforest. But you've got to have water. And these raw prawns with cooked heads who think they're going to go and terraform Mars, or live under a dome on the moon, or in a space station in microgravity in orbit. They think they're going to escape from the industrial venerealisation of Earth. Re-engineering the biosphere to make it more like Venus on an industrial scale for wages, for salary, for profit, for hire, for reward, for the fun of it, for the glory of it, in order to try to do more next year than they do this year, because they did more this year than they did last year, and they all want to do more than their fathers and their grandfathers and their mothers and their grandmothers. More, 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 more. None of them are content. They're all feeding the insecurity complex, the one that was generated by not having had enough cuddles when they were supposed to be being breastfed. That's why the richest of them pay somebody else to look after their children, and their children grow up to have an even bigger hole in their emotional self-esteem. Ask Lachlan Murdoch, or Kerry Packer's son, or Charlie, Andy, Harry and Will in the British panoply of royal god wannabes. As if Trumpy were not a sufficient example. Top Stalin and Hitler and all the other viciously neglected, brutally savaged, neurotic megalomaniacs and wannabes who have to prove that they're good enough by being better than everybody. Just when they thought they'd recovered from the 2009 global financial collapse, now they've got a pandemic that's frightened China into building not 1,000-bed hospital, but two. In fact, one of them might be 1,500 beds, erected in the record time of 10 days or a fortnight, because allegedly of a coronavirus, a novel coronavirus, just like the one that causes the common cold, only this one gives you viral pneumonia, and maybe 20% of the people who get it get very sick. Death rate at the moment looking officially to be 2.8%. Everybody who gets it seems to be infecting 3 to 5 people. Said to have had its epicenter in a marketplace in Wuhan, where they indeed sell bats for consumption and snakes for consumption. And there was a lot of brouhaha about how this virus had jumped from bats to snakes and snakes to Chinamen. But then they swabbed the market. They did 200 swabs all over the market, and they found 32 positive novel coronavirus results, and none of them were where the bats or the snakes or the other live animals were. All the positive test results came from the seafood collection, storage, preparation and sales area. And they reckon it's highly unlikely that a coronavirus is going to A, infect a fish, and then B, jump out of the fish, and then C, get into a human. But a coronavirus, or whatever this is, could quite well apparently have come into the market in the fresh water that is used to wash down the seafood area. And there are stories variously debunkable. I have no means to judge the accuracy of these stories, but there are various stories getting around to the effect that the Chinese version of Porton Down, which is infamous British biological chemical warfare establishment, is on the outskirts of Wuhan. So you kind of throw darts labelled data points onto the wall, and we have those data points We have all of the novel coronavirus swabs at the market came from the seafood area. We have the Chinamen behaving like they know something about this virus that nobody else knows. Like maybe it runs true for 5 generations and then suddenly it mutates and becomes an all around killer. So it can get all around the world and then go fizz bang pop. There are other sort of data points around that one, like the idea that the Chinese are now knocking on doors and taking people's temperatures in their apartments and whipping them out of their housing units if they are febrile. They've got drones with loudspeakers and cameras roaming the streets, shouting at people and telling them to go home, go back inside, particularly if they haven't got masks on. There's bits of footage coming out of China of people dropping down on the streets too sick to walk home. There's other bits of footage of people dying in the hospital waiting rooms. Um, that level of morbidity and mortality doesn't gel well with the theory that it's only got a mortality rate of 2.8% and it's only infecting 3 to 5 people each. There is the idea that you can be infectious and contagious for 2 weeks before you show any symptoms or feel sick. Either which way you cut, slice, and dice this plate full of mustard, the tourism industry is pretty much dead. If you own shares in any tourist enterprise, whether it's a bus carrier company, a tour guiding company, caravan park, motel, airlines, cruise ships, Christ, who would want to go on a cruise ship and get stuck in a four-walled apartment with no windows because 8,000 people are on the cruise ship and 5 of them are critically ill and 25 of them are been hospitalised and you're in quarantine? You feel like doing that for your holiday, do you? Now, who wants to accept a cruise ship coming into their port? Do we need another 10,000 bioreactors incubating the virus? China, you can't go anywhere. Hong Kong's closed its borders to anybody from any nation who's coming out of China. All of these airlines, all of these motels, all of these businesses, they were all running on a razor thin operating margin. They were barely covering their own costs. Cutthroat competition, all trying to do better than each other because the supply of cashed up yuppies who can afford to spend up big and piss off to the other side of the world to look at the local yokels and pay through the nose to do so, that's dwindling because nobody is able to make a fat profit easily, legally. And I don't know how the criminals are doing either. I think the whole economy is shrinking. Can you continue to pay your staff at a motel or a coffee shop or an airline or a bus company for a month, 2 months with no tourists? No income. I don't think you can. How many of those companies have zero debt over their premises? How many have only got their operating cash flow to worry about? Not many. I'd wager that nearly all of them are making a monthly loan repayment to service the debt with which they bought or set up the business. So yeah, I think you can expect a wave of contraction in the tourism industry, and I can't see that there's any actual reason to lament that because burning fossil fuels for the fun of it is all the tourism industry is dedicated to doing. They want people to travel from Scotland to Glen to look at the Celtic standing stones and buy a Glen tartan and a tam o' shanter made in China. Okay, for the sake of the grandchildren, that has to stop. Nobody wanted to stop voluntarily, so the Gaia hypothesis or the Chinese in their germ lab have come up with a disease that frightens everybody into shutting down the tourism industry. And if in 3 months' time the novel coronavirus has faded out and done nothing, the tourism industry is still going to be dead, because once it's down, you can't reboot it. The, the negative multiplier effect will have swept through the entire economy. A lot of manufacturing is going to die in the arse too, because 3 weeks after the Wuhan province of China shut down, there'll be nothing arriving at the other end of the supply pipeline, and Wuhan is in the center of a large manufacturing export industrial region. So if you were buying fencing materials out of China to put brand new fences all over your country that was burnt in a bushfire 2 or 3 months ago, and expecting it was going to come in a week's time, you might not be going to get it, because nobody's been going to work in the fence making factory, because the drone with a loudspeaker won't let them out of the apartment. Yeah. Speaking of masks, shopping on Friday in Glen, and there was a young couple, each one of them with a shopping trolley, piled up a metre or more high, jam-packed full of all of the, I think, beef and chunky vegetables was the particular soup they were buying, but all of the canned food that they could stuff in their trolley, making multiple journeys, both of them wearing very expensive, properly sealing hospital-type masks, rubber gloves, and both wearing goggles to stop droplets getting into their eyes. Seemed to be late, she would have been late 20s, he would have been early 30s. Cashed up, actual preppers in Glen Innes, worrying about the novel coronavirus. And I had a bit of a conversation with them, might even get them on the channel. And as I said to them, Glen Innes has got about 100 or so wind turbines made in China on the Western Ridge Line. Pretty sure there would be half a dozen people per week going from the wind farms to China, and China to the wind farms is a regular thing, bringing expertise that the Australians are not permitted to be taught in order to keep the Chinese wind farms running. Between Christmas and New Year, a whole bunch of people in Glen Innes who are employed in socially active type jobs, they get around the place and they meet a lot of people, they see a lot of people. They got a really bad head cold flu that knocked them out for Christmas to New Year. They didn't get to go away on holidays. They spent it in the bedroom, red in the face, sniffling, dripping in the nose, and feeling shithouse. This novel coronavirus started to move in the middle of December. It's entirely possible that novel coronavirus, the wave front, went through Glen Innes on Christmas Day. Just saying, like the ardent preppers in Bilo were probably 6 weeks too late to actually have a shot at missing their contact with the virus. But 6 weeks ago, they were probably still living in one of the cities. I don't know. I've never seen them before. Don't know whether they're locals or whether they're your literal, actual refugees from global warming and novel coronavirus. The thought of novel coronavirus, because at the moment that's what's got people acting. It's not the numbers. It's what somebody in authority in China appears to know, and they're acting on it, and that's freaking the shit out of everybody else on the planet. Look at that. The reflection is getting rained on. Not heavily, but it is spitting again. As I said, I probably should have run off up the hill and squirted into town and mowed my son's lawn around his workshop, rather than sitting here and pontificating about the state of the world, weighing its problems on me tiny little scale, measuring the results, and pontificating. From Contemplation Rock. but you get that. I've never had me pump at full height before. At 50 millimetres, first 10 millimetres wet the ground. Well, I'd had 111 last month, so it was pretty near to being damp already, but the equation goes the first 10 millimetres wets the ground in a heavy chunk of rain, and then after that every millimetre is about half a centimetre. So the 40 mil that followed the first 10 has caused the dam to come up about 20 centimetres, 8 inches. To just below where the pump actually was when I was first running it. So technically, theoretically, I could have left the thing where it was, not moved it the last twice that I did, and then sauntered down here this morning and lifted it up in one fell swoop. But you learn these things as you go. And if you think my forest floor looks green, check that eye-hurting verdancy across the fence, where you haven't got any dead brown gum leaves or sticks to break up the green of the green of the greeniness. So, hi ho, hi ho. Off to walk the pipeline we go. Damn, that's green. When I put this pipeline in, like a few people, I was worried that the pipe might migrate downhill. We're getting a different phenomenon. It was laid in hot weather, and when you get a bit of cold weather, the whole length of the plastic contracts and it's pulling itself tight on the corners, which I didn't really expect it to do. But it doesn't seem to be a critical thing at the moment because, well, yeah, maybe that's something I should have thought about. The pipe is empty. It hasn't got any air, any water in it. Oh. Toadstools. Not something I would think about eating. Don't know what they are or whether they're edible, but I don't know, therefore I won't. A tunnel, an elongated glade. And yeah, pipeline is pulled towards the inner curve on all of its bends. It really is pleasant having a 40 hectare big backyard. Such variety. These were the ants that hilled up, and they had a reason too, didn't they? This little strip didn't get cleared. Originally it was a buffer against that stuff out there, which got cleared in the 1930s, I suppose, maybe 1880s, and then again in the 1930s, and then it got bulldozed in the 1950s. This stuff here, it got left alone. Just a narrow little 50-metre strip. And then just before I bought the place, in 1990, this side all got cleared. At least the forest is trying to replace the topsoil that washed off here 150 years ago. Because there's nothing here that's kind of older than 150 years. I don't think anyway. Under that there's a tree stump that was killed 150 years ago, and it's coppiced. Axe cut stump. Axe cut stump. Axe cut stump. On a coppice. On a stump. There's the original central root ball. So let's say the original tree was 1870s, 1930s for the axe cut double-sided coppice, and then it's probably burnt in 1958 and then finally fallen over. This one here beside it, it stayed there. This might be the fire of 1939, and the outside burning on it, the 58 fire, with the hollow inside it probably going back to the 1870s. That bulging in the bark, that probably covers the top of the old stump, and you've got a single coppice on it. Every time the trees die, the ones that can have a go at rebooting themselves. You buy a patch of Australia, you're buying a patch of slow time country. These things grow half an inch vertically per year in a good year when they're healthy. Every time a fire goes under them, burns the old, dry, dead brown leaves. So they become an effective bushfire clock. Here's one. If we come down here, that's the charcoal layer. So, where my finger's pointing is 1958. That's the intervening time since, 60 years, 62 years. Slow time country. And in the 1880s, there was some nutter in Queensland who patented a method of extracting sugar from the starch, which is to be found in the central core of the stem. Because inland Queensland had so many of these things that were taller than a person that he advocated going out and killing them all, so that he could try to compete with sugar cane and sugar beet, both of which are annual crops, and he wanted to cut down 500 or 1,000-year-old xantharias for his sugar distillery. The spirit of Australia. If it moves, shoot it. If it doesn't move, chop it down. If you can't get your axe into it, try dynamite, and if that doesn't work, rent it out for advertising space. Hello, furball. Hey, how are you going? You've got a nice little day camp there in among the xantharias, haven't you? Yes, I'll go around you. I don't want to disturb you in your little camp. Yeah, you've got your back to the wind, got your back to the rain. You can see anyone or anything that's coming. You're a good little furball. Yes, you are. Epigenetically perfectly designed to live here. Nowhere on earth is there any animal that fits in here better than he does. There are no better plants for this part of Australia than the ones that are already growing here. That's why they're growing here, because everything that was less well suited to live here died. The idea that you can come here and bulldoze the functional biology and replace it with a single artificial plant and grow it and harvest everything and thus acquire a surplus which can be shipped off to market and turned into a profit. It literally goes 180 degrees opposed to the prime function of biology. It's the opposite of how life on Earth works. The idea is to try and put more into the environment than you take away from it every year. And that way, the entire environment is enriched, and next year there's a bigger harvest for everyone, of all species. It's not like it's rocket science or brain surgery. Not even rocket surgery, to be honest. A downburst out of a storm cell has knocked a whole bunch of that melaleuca down. Because that's what this is. It's tea tree, 20 feet high. Absolutely glorious. Except when it's really, really hot and dry and windy. And yeah, then it sort of puts on a good impersonation of a bushfire fuel bomb. I might even have to try and think of something to do with all that. I've often fantasised about making rustic furniture from it. But while it was up and alive, it seemed like the wrong thing to do. Now that it's, well, yeah, is it doomed? Is it acceptable to decide that it's not going to recover from whatever put it in that position and start taking pieces out and using them for woodwork? Pretty sure that I won't be doing anything any harm. And when you buy the title deed, you make yourself responsible for everything that's alive inside your boundaries. You don't own the airspace rights, you don't own the mineral rights, you don't own the water rights. They're all separate pieces of paper. You own the top 6 inches of the topsoil and anything that lives there, as long as it's not endangered or protected or growing on a slope steeper than 30 degrees. Pretty much, if you own the title deed, you are entitled to attempt to make a profit out of it. This I burnt. Here, in about 1995, and then up here in 2014. And that one did not survive. This area here, that core is the area that has the starch which the lunatic in Queensland wanted to distill for sugar. He used to have a mate who had one of these things that was 18.5 feet tall when he died. Imagine that. He owned the place for about 15 years. It grew maybe, well, that country, probably 3 or 4 inches in the whole time that he was alive owning the land. When he died, he left behind him a 630-year-old grass tree. It's a big responsibility when you buy a title deed in Australia. You make yourself responsible for everything. And, as I said, the prime function of biology is the more life occupies a space, the more life can occupy that space. So the idea is to increase the biomass and increase the biodiversity during your tenure upon the land. If you acquire responsibility for a piece of land and you make the biomass diminish, you make the biodiversity grow less, then in the eyes of the Gaia hypothesis, the collective creator God of the entire universe, perhaps, you're a bit of a scumbag. You're turning rainforest or food forest into desert. You want to rack up goody points on the cosmic scoreboard, you have to be respectful of every kind of life there is. Because that is the meaning of life. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Increase the biomass, increase the biodiversity. And now that we have some blue in the sky, I must go into town and burn refined petroleum fuel in my Tanica Brush Cutter 500 in order to make the lawn look neat around my son's workshop. Because into every life a little contradiction must fall. It's really, really hard to be a completely coherent 100% super greenie. Drive yourself mad at this point in time. Everybody does the best that they can. I pay rates on 100 acres of endangered species sanctuary, and I burn two-stroke fuel to mow the lawn around my son's workshop. Because that's what seems like the thing that needs to happen right now. Ciao.